Hello and welcome to the Startups of London podcast. I'm your host Ozan and the founder of Startups of London. Today, I'm joined by John Lunn, CEO and founder of Gr4vy, which is a cloud payment orchestration platform. So John is a fintech entrepreneur with 21 years of experience in the field. He joined PayPal as the fourth employee in the UK in 2006, where as the global director of developer and startup relations, he built and grew PayPal's first developer relations team. He also experienced quite a few exits. He was the director of technology in CyberSource, which was sold to Visa, as far as I'm aware, for $2 billion in 2010. He also helped found Passmark Security, sold to RSA Security in 2006. In 2015, he was instrumental to the purchase of Gr4vy by PayPal and then joined the team. In 2016, Lunn was part of the team that launched PayPal Ventures, the venture capital arm of PayPal, $350 million fund with backing from the board. So I honestly feel privileged to have him on and have so many questions for him. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
So how did the online payments change over the years?
Well, when I started in online payments, we're basically running with a point of sale machine right at the beginning. So we had a couple of interns, a dot matrix printer, and a point of sale machine. That's right at the early days, because frankly, that's all there was in the market. So when these electronic interfaces to the point of sale machine and someone smart worked out how to connect, a web page with the payment rails that existed from store sales, that's when it kind of took off. But right at the beginning, we basically hacked it to get it working. And now, obviously, now it's totally exponential from where it was, but it's changed a lot.
It has. It's almost it almost has a puzzle-like feel, like Lego bricks in a way, doesn't it? When a company, a small business, for example, is trying to build a payment infrastructure, get some part of it from a certain service provider, another part from another one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with all things, especially with technology, it starts simple and then it gets more and more complicated until you need to find some other technology to put it back to simple again. So I think like right at the beginning, all you had was cards, and as we've gone on, with the PayPal coming into prominence, and now a lot of other wallets, as well as open banking and all kinds of new payment technologies coming in, it gets simple, but it also gets harder in other places. So the fact that these exist make it very simple for the consumer, makes it a lot harder for the merchants. So the complexity moves somewhere else, basically.
That's an interesting angle. I never thought about it. So has the fintech industry reached a maturation point, do you think, in terms of new business ideas, new problems to solve?
No, absolutely. I think you can probably see from how much venture capital is being deployed this year into fintech that we're way away from any chance of that happening anytime soon. I think as you unpack from beginning to end, you can see a lot of inefficiencies in payments, fintech, banking, everything. So I think there's a huge amount of space to invent new things in here, or just to optimize some of the older flows. And we've seen the rise of neobanks through to new payment types and insurance, etc. I mean, fintech's a broad church, but I think there's loads of space for innovation.
Something I learned trying to build businesses and talking to a lot of entrepreneurs over the last 5 or 6 years, and also reading people on risk theory, investment, is a very interesting bit about intuition and its role in decision making. So in a domain where you lack experience, it's actually not a very good idea to rely on intuition. Let's say you decide in the middle age to start to ride a motorcycle. You should not decide what to wear and how to ride the motorcycle with intuition. That can be potentially deadly. But if you're a cab driver for the last 30 years and you come up to an intersection or a roundabout and feel like it like some type of intuition says like there might be danger, then you should listen to your intuition. So that's kind of the way I think around it. And I think entrepreneurs need to nourish a certain type of intuition, and I think it's as valuable as gold, perhaps as valuable as Bitcoin, we should say now. And I think like your intuition is incredibly valuable because you have a lot of experience in this specific field in fintech, like, and going over the years. So like, what does your intuition tell you in terms of the existing problems not yet solved, areas to be focused in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a fintech is a classic space where you have to be a little bit careful of your intuition because you can go to jail. I think that's the other thing. You know, some parts of technology where you can go ahead and disrupt, but financial technology, there's regulation, there's laws.
Indeed.
And frankly, people really care about their money. It's one of the things they really care about. So it's one of those things where you can't go with your gut 100%. You have to back it with science, research, and probably a couple of lawyers. So I think for me, I still see it being unpacked. For me, the age of getting everything from one place when it comes to fintech is over, and now it's really specializing or optimizing in one particular space is where it's going. And you've got to back it with research. Like before we started Gr4vy, we talked to a lot of retailers about their problems. I mean, I had all this year of all these years of experience in payments, as did my co-founders. But again, you can't assume. Go and talk to your potential clients before you build this thing, because you need a bit of science to back your intuition. But yeah, often, I mean, I was a VC before I started Gr4vy, and that's all about intuition to start with. Like you hear something, think that's different, let me go and investigate it, and then you back it with diligence and science, etc., etc.
Yeah, the validation aspect, the backing of the idea is absolutely crucial. But there are already so many options, so many potential directions to look at. Then it usually pays. It's usually very, very valuable to start from a point of intuition and then use the fact to fact check that, to validate. Does that make sense in your experience?
Yeah. So it's funny, like, I studied actually in marine biology at university. And when I came out of university, like, obviously I didn't end up doing that. But one of the things I basically learned at university is come up with a hypothesis and then challenge it. And that's kind of how I live my life when it comes to business, is like come up with a hypothesis and then challenge it and prove yourself right or wrong. And that's kind of everything I've done here is followed that. It probably drives my kids mad, but that's the way
I get it. Like, go to a tangent here for a second. I was listening to a bit from Gr4vy, and he talked about this interesting distinction between what's rational and what's empirical, right? And I studied like sociology and psychology, and those disciplines really bias you to try to look at the world in a rational way and try to really top down logically find answers to all those type of questions. But honestly, that approach falls flat on its face, I think, when it comes to entrepreneurship. You just cannot deduce your way to solutions and products market would want. You need to be empirical rather than rational, I would say. So that's a lesson I've learned over the last years.
Yeah, there's definitely a certain amount of, hey, let's try it out. And I'll give you that's what makes an entrepreneur, right? You're prepared to take risks. And if that's not what you're going to do, then you probably shouldn't be an entrepreneur.
Indeed. So tell me more about the story of Gr4vy. So it's, by the way, for the audience, it is GR, the number 4, and then VY.
Sure. So the background of Gr4vy, why we came up with this thing, was purely frustration. I was, investing in companies, and also had worked at PayPal for many years. And I just kept on having the same conversation with retailers. And this would be, look, you should add, for example, PayPal, or you should have this cool functionality from one of the startups that I'd invested in. And the retailers would say to me, yeah, we'd really like to do that, but it's going to take 2 years, or it's going to take 8 months. And I was just trying to work it out. Like I spent a lot of time at PayPal trying to make integration as easy as possible. And I, got it down to basically 3 lines of code. And I was still hearing back from retailers like, yeah, it's going to take 2 years. I mean, it's 3 lines of code. Why would it take 2 years? And I dug into it. And the problem is that every retailer in the world has a payments team. And, when you start out there on the internet, your first integration is, integrate to a payments company like Stripe or Braintree, and that's the first thing you do. And then 6 months later, you need to go and add PayPal, and then 6 months later, You might go and add a buy now, pay later provider. And then you go to another country and you might end up adding one or two more payment providers. And as you grow, what happens is that payments team internally gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you go and talk to some of the like really successful companies, in the States, for example, that have been around for years and are kind of assumed to be great at payments. They have 300 plus people in their payment team.
Oh, wow.
And for me, I was just looking at it thinking that team doesn't generate any revenue. That team is a total cost to the business.
Yeah.
But also every single retailer is building the same thing, frankly. They're all building basically plumbing to connect all these pipes to payments independently using custom code. And we all know the more custom code you have, the slower you get. And by the time they get large, these retailers are being held back by their own payment systems. So I just said, let's just build that one thing. Let's build the plumbing. Let's build a plumbing tool, basically, that we can give to retailers to allow them to manage all of their payment options without needing an army of engineers to do that. And that was the simple concept of Gr4vy is let's do one thing. Let's do one thing and let's do it really well. When we started this thing, we had a lot of conversations with retailers about how we should build it. And one of those things, should we build a SaaS, something that you would connect to and we just deal with it? And the larger the retailer, the louder they screamed no. They're like, first thing, no offense, 9-month-old seed-funded startup, we're not going to put our entire revenue stream through you, which is fair enough. But the bigger they got, the more it's like, we already have stuff. We already have stuff in payments. We have fulfillment systems. We have accounting systems. We need something that we can slowly migrate to, not something where we have to rip and replace our entire payment infrastructure. So that's why we built Gr4vy as a cloud company.
That's wild, actually. So let me get this straight. Solutions like Stripe, PayPal, and all the other ones out there, they do particular things. They do it well. They do it for a massive number of businesses out there. But as a company gets bigger, if it is doing some international expansion or has different use cases, then they start to rely on a few and then many of these, which creates the problem of integrating them all into a single system. And to do that, they have to build a payments team, which is a cost for the company, and these teams have to be big. So that am I getting the picture right? Is that the core problem here?
Exactly. It's the classic custom code versus a tool, which we've seen in all parts of business, and yeah, exactly what you said.
So Gr4vy, a point I'm confused about is you said we are focusing on a single thing. So like what that single thing is that doing the pipeline infrastructure between these platforms, if you will? Yeah. Is that the service?
Yeah, it's basically the plumbing. So we've built a tool that a retailer can deploy that connects to all of the payment types that they might need out there. And then it gives control to the head of product or the product manager or the finance manager by giving them this, beautiful no-code interface in the middle. So they want to go and add a new payment type, change payment types, or manage how their payments flow through the system. They can do it without needing an engineer because it's all a no-code layer. So it takes the need for an engineer to change code and puts it into the hand of a product manager to basically design how they want payments to flow.
Where is Gr4vy in terms of today, in terms of team, revenue, and funding? Can you walk us through that?
Team-wise, we're about 24 people. So we're a totally distributed team. So, we started during COVID and we like the way we work. So we let people work from anywhere in the world. So we have people in North America, in Carolina, in Florida, and a group of us in California. And then we have 12 people in London or around the London area. Then we have 3 people in Argentina. So we're kind of all over the place. So that the team is many years of experience. We have people who've joined us from Spreedly, from Adyen, from PayPal, from Recurly, from Square, etc. So we have a team of payment experts, but we've always believed we get the best out of people where they can work from where they want to be, and we'll stick to that. So that's where we are from a team perspective. Let's put it like this: we were I think 5 people in April. We're 24 now, so we're growing pretty fast. And then from a funding perspective, we raised a seed round last year in October, and then we did our Series A this year in April. So we've raised $12.2 million so far. That's funding wise. Revenue we don't talk about yet. We're early, 6 months in now, so we decided not to talk about revenue yet.
Yeah. That's a very encouraging picture, I must admit. It's and you obviously have a lot of experience in the field, and the combined experience of that team is impressive as well. I'm guessing there are areas of cross germination, sometimes disagreements. So, is there a disagreement that has been very fruitful to where the business is going so far that you remember?
We disagree all the time. We have a very open, I don't like using the word culture. A lot of people like to use it, but we have a very open group of people. So we debate stuff very long and very hard. And I think that's super healthy. So right at the beginning, we had the whole, what system should we use to build this? And we had let's build our own servers, and then let's go cloud, and then let's go Kubernetes, and then let's go serverless. So actually we had to change our technology because we realized the one thing we were using wasn't going to work for us. But so for technology side, if you know engineers are very passionate about the technology that we or they build on. So we've had some great debates there. And I think, look, I have a very open system, like anyone can question anything. But I always say, this is not a democracy, it's a benevolent dictatorship. So that's how I like to run things.
It definitely should not be a democracy. I agree with that. Perhaps a meritocracy that can be more agreeable for a company, but even that has its issues. I've worked as a people consultant, people and culture type of a consultant for some tech businesses, and in my experience, engineers do disagree, but they for the most part, they know how to disagree well. They stay on topic. They don't always make it personal, and then they listen to objections, and then they can actually change their stance when they are greeted by new facts or data. I think that's why I love engineering, and I have a lot of engineer friends, and that disagreement is the fruitful type of disagreement. So it's really good to have it within the company, I think.
Yeah, it back to the scientific mind. It's all about looking for that hypothesis, and you might not agree, but the proof is in the pudding. So that's how it works out.
A single point of question that I have is about tokenization. It's quite a new term. Could you perhaps explain what tokenization is and what it could mean for the future, and how does it relate to Gr4vy?
Yeah, tokenization, the easiest way to describe it is a bit like walking into a casino and exchanging cash for a chip. That's really the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Those chips are tokens. And so how it really relates to payment, and it's not the same in everything in all different areas, but particularly for payments, tokenization, it was kind of created to solve the problem of people's credit cards being held by retailers all over the world. And we saw, to start with, you didn't really have a choice. And some scary things happened at sort of the beginning of internet payments, where people had big lists of consumers' credit cards and Excel spreadsheets and all kinds of stuff. So there was a number of hacks and pretty public, stealing of data, and the industry stepped in and created PCI, which is, a set of standards that you have to follow if you store credit cards, and they have to be encrypted and all the rest of it. And if you decide to do that yourself, then there's a certain amount of, you have to have an audit every year, and you have to follow certain rules and be scanned every quarter, et cetera. So it's quite a large operational overhead to have that. And so the payment companies or payment service providers solution was to create tokenization for credit cards. So, if you're using a particular PSP, what you do is the first transaction, you send the credit card number to them, they return a token back to you. And then from that point onwards, if you want to build that consumer, you can reference the token rather than the original credit card, and you don't need to store the card anymore. The problem that's happened is, every payment service provider has basically got their own tokens. So if you're using payment service provider A, and then you want to move to service provider B, your problem is all the tokens you have are service provider A's tokens, and they won't work on service provider B. So you're in this bit of a dilemma at that point, how do I do this without losing all my customers? particularly in the US, you can, legally, you can ask service provider A to give all your, raw PANs or raw credit card numbers to service provider B, and they should work together. In reality, that's a slow and painful process, and you end up losing quite a lot of customers. So that's the first part of tokenization. The second thing that's happening now is the card associations themselves. So I'm talking Visa, MasterCard, American Express, have decided that actually a better solution as far as they're concerned is a retailer should tokenize with them. So you make a call to them, and then you will get a token back that's a particular token that will work for that consumer, for you, for that card, for that association. And that theoretically should work through every payment service provider out there. It comes with a whole load of complexity, as you can imagine. Like, you've got to keep these things up to date. You've got to manage it. So it's quite early in the rollout, and that's called network tokenization. But it's quite encouraging. It does make a few little problems rising up, and it's quite hard to manage as a retailer. But the way that we look at this is, let's take that complexity away from the retailer totally. So we have our Vault, which is our tokenization system. That basically, if a retailer connects to Gr4vy and then uses our Vault, what happens is we tokenize that transaction across all their payments providers. So say if they've got 3, they send the credit card details through to us. We then tokenize it on every payment provider they work with already. So we have now 3 tokens. We also tokenize it ourselves because we're PCI 1 compliant. So that's 4 tokens. And then if they're using, or they want to use network tokenization, we then do Visa, MasterCard, American Express. So that's at least 5 tokens. And we then put that behind the single big token, as it were, and we return the big token back to the merchant. And that means that from that point onwards, anytime they make a call to Gr4vy, whatever's the orchestration set up in the background, that transaction will run, and they don't need to worry about whether it's being done through network tokenization or tokenization directly with a payment service provider, or even a brand new payment provider that we're using the raw PAN to set up with.
That's really fascinating. And it's just very funny in the sense that, to me, for someone who's just fresh, perhaps a fresh graduate out of college, wanting to build a business in fintech, versus someone who has the experience and knows in depth the area, like, there's a huge difference when it comes to the competitive advantage and disadvantage and the asymmetry there. So I think that's fascinating. But perhaps my final question, or the penultimate one, I don't know, but in terms of something big is happening, a big change is happening in the world. Now, all money is digital in a way. Mm-hmm. I literally can remember the times I used cash over the last 3 years. I can count them, perhaps 3 or 5. So our relationship with money is changing. Our relationship with digital purchasing is changing. There are all these in-game currencies. I'm a bit of a gamer myself, so I've been purchasing in-game currency and like doing that kind of a spending there for the last 10 years. And like that's now become mainstream. And with all these things, like this decent, like I'm not an expert in this, but I do try to read, I do try to learn about it, like these trustless networks, these decentralized finance solutions, they're definitely changing the industry in a certain way. Now, perhaps these are unrelated developments to the untrained eye, but I tend to think these are part of a more bigger story of change when taken together. So my question to you in that sense is, looking at the direction of this change with all these blockchain solutions, DeFi, trustless networks, money being digital, in-game currencies, everything together, who is going to lose out? Who loses here? Who wins here? For example, is it bad for Visa or MasterCard, this direction we're heading in? Is it good for them? Who is it bad? Who is it good for? And how will this sit into Gr4vy's plans for the future?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a reason we built Gr4vy right now, and one of those reasons is the future is pretty uncertain, I would say. Like as you stated, then there is a gut or intuition feel that it's moving slowly towards that space, and it's becoming more institutionally acceptable. But we built Gr4vy because of the future being uncertain, and that plumbing layer in the middle becomes even more important when things are changing so fast. So being able to adapt and adopt and change what you're doing quickly and nimbly is what Gr4vy is all about. So I'm kind of really excited about that future, and I think we're in a really good position to do that. But where winners and losers, etc. I think I'm the part of this that makes me most excited is actually the potential for helping people that perhaps have been excluded or been badly treated in the financial system. And I look at Gr4vy and whatever you think of their parent, etc. But I love the idea that as a alternative way of banking people who've kind of been excluded from the banking system so far, so the underbanked or unbanked. Yeah. I think they are able to manage their money in a way where they're not being charged an arm and a leg. And if you look over the lifetime of a person with a low credit score versus a person with a high credit score, it's 5 times more expensive to have a low credit score than have a high one. You pay more for everything, even though you have less money. And that's just because, you're higher risk, and the traditional institutions are all about risk. So if there is a way to do this in a DeFi fashion and really allow people who couldn't bank before to bank on, a blockchain type environment and be able to move their money in a cheaper, freer fashion, then I think that starts to push from the bottom upwards. And do I think retail's ready for crypto quite yet? No, I don't. And I think even stable coins are a little bit of a push right now, because not a lot of people are using them as sharp, and people view different coins as different. Some are commodities, some people are looking at them basically as gold, and you're not going to spend gold to buy an apple. So there are things going on there that are great, and it is starting to mature. But if a large proportion of the population is banking on a sort of DeFi bank, then there needs to be a way for them to spend their money. And that won't be credit cards. That will be a new way of taking that in real time and buying stuff online. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited by the future, and I'm more excited about what it will do for people who need help than the people who have already got a lot of money.
Perhaps in that case, the ability to really learn new stuff, use the expertise you have within the team, really adapt to changes, see new problem areas will be even more important than fixating on the problem today, because things change very, very quickly. And I am excited for the future as well, especially in this space. Thank you very much for joining in this chat. I'm afraid we've run out of time, but it was so good to have you. I would love to have you again, perhaps in a few, let's say, quarters, perhaps next year, to see what your progress has been. And which assumptions came through, and to really check up on the growth of Gr4vy. So for the audience out there, check out Gr4vy. Again, thank you, John, for being a part of this episode.
Thank you for having me.